Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. This is Ukraine War News Updates. It's the first part thereof for the 16th of January 2024. Thank you for inviting me into your brains. It's not an invasion. No, I appreciate that, and I do spend an awful lot of time with you guys. Well, at least those who aren't unique visitors to the site. Anyway, let's get on with it. Enough waffle. This is the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. So this is a very significant day. We are seeing numbers being posted that are a good deal higher than we've seen over the last week or so. We are over 1,000 personnel loss for the Russians. That's 1,110. That's a really high number. 24 tanks in the last 24 hours is a really high number. 36 APVs, armored personnel vehicles, so that's infantry fighting vehicles, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. 36 in one day is a really high number. 30 artillery systems in one day is a really high number. 3 multiple launch rocket systems, that's above the average. That is a high number. And 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, that's about double the average. That's a high number. We have 2 aircraft to add. We'll talk a little bit more about those 2 really high value aircraft that were lost yesterday. 33 vehicles and fuel tanks is a high number, and 9 pieces of special equipment is a really high number in that category as well. So that is an absolutely fantastic day for the Ukrainians in terms of their war efforts, if it is to be believed. And even if you took 25%, but a third off that, 20%, 30%, whatever you think is an over-exaggeration or inaccuracy in the statistics, those are still really significant numbers. So I think whichever way you slice and dice these stats, Russia had a bad day yesterday. The question is always, well, how did that compare to the Ukrainian losses? I can tell you the Ukrainians didn't lose 2 incredibly high-value air assets yesterday. And I'm pretty sure they weren't losing this amount of APVs, tanks, and artillery systems as well. So I would argue that yesterday was a good day for the Ukrainians in reality, and I would just question what's going on the front lines, just trying to work out where all those losses would be coming from, given that it's been fairly static on the front lines. I'll be interested to see if there are any movements on the front lines today, or whether this is just a case of the Russians bashing their head against a brick wall in trying these big big combined arms maneuvers. And by combined I just mean really troops plus APVs and tanks. You know, whether they are just sending those in to be attrited, I don't know. Andrew Perpetua has his list from yesterday, but actually this is from quite a long time ago. Remember, we didn't have his list from yesterday, so this probably refers to the previous day as well. He says, here are the losses I could find yesterday, not counting the Magyar video that I didn't watch because it's like 19 minutes long and it takes me like 10 minutes per minute to watch his videos. In other words, if Magyar's put out a new video of Russian losses and that is 19 minutes long, there is almost certainly going to be another at least 19 vehicles on there. So, you know, although this looks like 2.5 to 1 probably ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses, you could probably add an awful lot more equipment on there for Magyar's single video. Now, we'll look at the losses and see what the value difference is between them. 3 boats and another Strela 10 lost for the Ukrainians here. There's a Bradley, a couple of older tanks, a Bradley, and the rest is kind of pickup trucks and whatnot. So a little bit of high value in a damaged Bradley, but of course we don't know with these damaged ones. We don't know how badly damaged they are. One of those boats is sunk to a damage. So again, what was the real outcome there for those vehicles? And when we look at the Russian losses, mainly the same kind of thing with regard to the damaged and destroyed, although probably slightly more destroyed and a few abandoned here. So we have some electronic warfare equipment and surveillance equipment. Don't really know the value of that. It's undescribed there. A number of tanks, variety T-80s, T-72s, a bunch of infantry fighting vehicles, and even more APCs, and that's a large number of APCs. suggesting some kind of maneuver. All of this sort of equipment there suggests that the Russians were trying some offensive maneuvers yesterday, and they appear to, as I keep saying, lose far more equipment when they are on the attack than when they're on the defense. And therefore, this period of defense for the Ukrainians over the winter, spring, and who knows, maybe even further, it might be that the Ukrainians don't mount a major offensive until 2025, although there's also been this claim that they need to take X, Y, and Z before October of this next year. So there are different theories and rumors going around, but this period of active defense ends up being very useful for the Ukrainians given these sort of attrition rates. And remember, Magyar's video is not added to that. Now let's go back to those two planes, the IL-22 and the A-50, really high value command and control and radar planes. Radio Nuke says, we know the IL-22 made an emergency landing at Anapa International Airport. However, this is quite the radar tape. From Telegram, quote, soldiers of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed the enemy A-50 long-range radar detection aircraft and the IL-22 enemy air control post. Thanks to the Air Force for this excellently planned and conducted operation in Azov region. So here we have a number of planes doing their thing there. I'm not 100% sure what this shows, other than there's a plane that disappears here. So we have 4 planes circling around there, and then one disappears just there, and then another disappears and reappears, it disappears again, and then we're left, so who knows exactly, what is entailed by this. The claim is that the IL-22 did do a crash landing, and there are different theories as to how much damage was done to this. So this is a photo that did come out. The vertical stabilizer of the Russian IL-22M pictured here at Anapa Airport after taking a severe missile hit over the Sea of Azov. The Ukrainians are claiming this is destroyed and that it is beyond, you can see all of the shrapnel here. They say it is beyond repair. If this is the tail, you could read this both ways. This is either the lightest part of the damage or it's the heaviest part of the damage. Now, if they are in the air saying we need ambulances and fire trucks, then you're assuming that that plane was on fire when it landed. I'm thinking it's more plausible that this machine is beyond repair, given that, you'd have to replace this entire tail part here. I imagine that the worst of the damage is further up the plane. Now, satellite images of the A-50 and IL-22 route from yesterday, the Su-30SM accompanying the A-50 radioed that someone had fallen like a candle and that a large fire had broken out on the ground. So again, that tells you something as well. Justin Bronk, who's the Royal United Services Institute expert on aviation. He's a really good voice in this war. From a Ukrainian clip, range from the nearest likely forward location for a Patriot launcher is about 140 kilometers from where the A-50 orbit was when reportedly shot down. A long shot, but should be within the envelope for a PAC-2 GEM and a PAC-3 MSE missiles. High risk, but what a result if confirmed. So this is someone you need to pay attention to. They're saying, right, it is at the edge of the range for a Patriot system. And this is exactly where I was saying a Patriot should be placed, near the front line to take out anything operating within this. Unfortunately, at the time, it was where all sorts of aviation was happening because of the Ukrainian offensive. Now that's sort of ground to a halt. It's almost like Johnny come lately. However, if it's taking out an A-50, then that is a really good return on that risk investment. This is potentially a successful Patriot positioning and strike, and that's coming from Justin Bronk. So I'd take that fairly seriously, but it is fairly high risk, and as he says, it is a long shot, so who knows what happened. But the Ukrainians are claiming that they shot it down somehow. There are rumors that there were things placed inside the planes that made them that either spoofed Russian air defenses or something. There are all sorts of different rumors going around. The Russians are claiming that the SAS were inside. The SAS were operating somewhere in here and shot these planes with manpads themselves. That's never going to have happened. But Anyway, so this is just this is a comment, and take it for what it is. It's just a comment on my YouTube channel from Glyn Dukes, but thank you very much, mate, for saying, for commenting. So to cut down on speculation regarding the A-50, Russian stupidity confirmed. Satellite tracks of its flight path show it as far north as Berdyansk. OMG, WTF. What the heck are they doing pushing it so far forward? It's at the limit of a Patriot's range, but flying high in thin air, the Patriot has clearly got the reach. In other words, less air resistance when you're flying high up, I presume here, which means that you don't need as much fuel, which means you can, fly further. Depending on exactly where the battery was located, it looks like this can be a new record for a successful wartime intercept of an aircraft. AMRAAM-D still holds the record for longest ever, but that was under peacetime test conditions. This would never have worked against a maneuverable fighter, but against something that this big and slow, Patriot has the kinetic energy to get there. Utter recklessness on the part of the Russians pushing the A-50 so close to the front line. This should not have happened. Now the speculation can shift as to why it was so far forward. Maybe the radar on the A-50 isn't as good as they say it is. Either way, you would think there are some folks at Raytheon have cracked open a can or two, so the manufacturers of Patriot, and are now pestering the Guinness Book of Records to get themselves an entry. I think, this is eminently plausible. Now we're hearing this morning that about 11 to 12 pilots were dead as a result of the destroyed A-50 and the IL-22, depending on how destroyed that was. In today's 323, we will try to answer the question about the attack of 3 of our aircraft in the Sea of Azov, so 3. This is from Fighter Bomber, the Russian pilot who is active on the front lines or in the war in Ukraine. So I'd take what he says fairly seriously. The question is quite logical. We will answer anyway. We'll try. According to my information, the Ukrainians have nothing to do with the loss of the A-50 aircraft. And I really hope that this time the commission for the analysis of the disaster will not F the pilots for weather reports and will not require signatures in the logs for checking the logs. It will not F the pilots at all, but the direct culprits of the tragedy. According to others, 11, according to other sources, 12 military 11, but according to other sources 12 military pilots died. So the claim is interesting here that 11 to 12 pilots died, so I'd say that's at least what's happened, but B, that previously pilots have been blamed when it's not been their fault and have had to sign logs in order to kind of admit their culpability. I think that's how I interpret that. So again, the truth doesn't come out here from Russian activities involving the Russian air disasters, I guess. In a northern military district, unfortunately, the worst and most dangerous enemy for the aerospace forces has become our air defense. So this is really openly claiming that it's their own air defense that is responsible. It always hits you in the back. It is impossible to protect against it or somehow provide for it or take it into account. But something needs to be done about this. No one is to blame, and this is a coincidence will not work here. So that is still the narrative from the Russians and from a fairly reliable source in some sense. So when there are losses, Fighter Bomber admits those losses, then they're generally at least true, true to at least that extent. Whether we can believe Fighter Bomber for his narrative as to what took place, that it definitely was air defense, I don't know. I just don't know. Both claims are plausible, but when you've got Zelensky now claiming as well it was the Ukrainians, well, certainly that these 2 planes were lost, I just don't know. Ukraine's main intelligence directorate confirms my tweet of last night. Moving on to a different subject now. There was a blast on Gogol Street in occupied Melitopol. So Ukrainian resistance is active. It's blew up a SUV with 4 invaders. At least one of them died. I think that was reported on Ukraine, the latest yesterday as well. Breaking, a Russian Su-34 has had to take evasive measures to avoid a missile, according to a radio intercept a few moments ago. The plane was over the Sea of Azov. So again, Sea of Azov, something's going on. Can that be explained by air defenses again misfiring, or is it Ukrainian air defenses? I don't know. Right. It's been 2 full weeks since Gerasimov has been seen alive. He is dead. Now, I am definitely not one for conspiracy theories, but there was this claim that Gerasimov was in Crimea when the big strikes from the Ukrainians took place on Crimea, and there are these claims that he died. And then it all kind of came from this anonymous Telegram comment, really, that then I think, was it Visegrad picked it up? and then it went a bit viral, and then everyone's talking about how Gerasimov has been killed. But the interesting fact of the matter is that although I pretty much dismissed that as being just hearsay, rumour, and having very low probability indeed, he hasn't actually been seen since. Now, we've had this a lot of times with Zaluzhny being claimed to have been killed, Budanov being claimed to have been killed, and then they pop up later and you're like, okay, they weren't dead. You know, it's not like all of these people have to be on show all the time just to disprove rumours of their deaths. But there is this kind of growing sense in the rumour mill that Gerasimov might not be with us anymore. As Spartan News says here, I'm beginning to believe that Jerry is not with us anymore. No sightings at all. The Ukrainian Air Force will miss his Ukrainian armed forces will miss his leadership of the Russian military. I don't know. I would add to my very low probability of him being killed in that strike, which was probably something like about 5%. I'm just kind of pulling that out of my posterior. I'd add a couple of percent onto that, so it might be like 8% now. Now we haven't seen him for a couple of weeks. That strike did get him. It's highly unlikely, but possible, I guess. Let me know what you think. And then just a bit more footage. I'll add to the linked footage that remember, you can always see this see these videos in full by clicking on the links in the description below. Here are two BM-27 multiple launch rocket systems, the Uragan 220mm, multiple launch rocket systems being destroyed in the Kherson region by precision strikes. I don't know whether that means that there are Excalibur rounds that are being fired here. Interesting to see the positions, though. I would have to check what the range of that strike would be, because you know, if that's not within artillery range, then you're looking at HIMARS. I don't think it's HIMARS. We're looking at the video footage. But, you know, two Uragans being taken out there is, again, more indications that the Russians are losing an awful lot of equipment in this general area, in the Krinky area, if you like. Although I think it's looking, you know, more and more hairy for those stationed in Krinky. Not really stationed in that bridgehead. As the General Staff said, 3 multiple launch rocket systems taken out yesterday. Well, there's 2 of them in that video and in that one area. Right, now let's go to distance strikes, and actually a very quiet night, all things considered. And what I think is significant here is when we've previously seen big losses for the Russians in terms of airstrike, you know, airplanes being destroyed, you know, Berdyansk, Luhansk air bases, and Su-34s being taken out of the air. The Russians respond with really big attacks, and lots of people were expecting this last night, and it didn't happen. If the Russians aren't firing missiles and drones en masse at Ukraine, and they could, this almost certainly says to me that actually that indicates that they can't. Because if they could, they would. They can't. They aren't, so they can't. Some kind of rhyme in there, I'm sure. Right? They would, they could. They aren't, so they can't. Again, I go back to this idea that the lack of missiles and drones indicates that they are firing them at the rate that they need them. And the again, fact that we have seen North Korean ballistic missiles used in this Ukraine war from the Russians indicates that they don't have those, and they wouldn't be going to North Korea and Iran to get their weapons if they had those stockpiles and production capacities themselves. They don't have those capacities, so they are going to these other places. In fact, the foreign minister, the North Korean foreign minister, was in Moscow yesterday, and what did he say? This is what the was it Sergei Lavrov said, what the Russians have said. North Korea is our closest neighbor and partner, with whom we are developing and intend to further develop partnerships in all areas. That's Peskov, Dmitry Peskov. Right, so yeah, who are your friends? Russia are in such a desperate position that their closest ally and partner is the biggest pariah nation in the world. Like North Korea, that has very limited ability to produce, you know, an economy that is basically non-existent. It's an entirely command economy, or, you know, communist. Just, it's says an awful lot if they're your best mates, right? It's Iran and North Korea. They're your best mates. That shows what position you're in. But if you're cozying up to them and saying, yeah, we've got this great partnership with them, it means that you need that partnership. If you are in this great power position, your rhetoric wouldn't be inviting North Korean foreign minister over to Moscow and saying, these are our closest partners. That's the sort of thing the US says to like the UK or Germany or something like that in these big power plays in the world, which is like, yeah, you are important to us and we are important to you, and this is communicating that to the world. If you're trying to communicate that North Korea really are important to you, it means that you need them, right? And if you need North Korea, it means you aren't being able to make missiles at the rate that you would like to fire them. So when we go back again, it's about piecing all these bits of the pieces of jigsaw together to form this greater, more accurate picture. When we look at this lack of missiles being fired into Ukraine fairly consistently at the moment, then this tells us that Russia are in missile trouble. Now, it's not to say they won't be able to get hold of them from these nefarious actors. And that is a challenge, and it is worrying. It's not to say they aren't producing. They are producing them, and they're producing them at a greater rate than they were at the beginning of the war. But of course, they're firing them at a very high rate. And if they can't match that rate, that fire rate, then A, that's good news for Ukraine, and B, where does that leave Russia strategically? Lots of people are talking about, there's this leaked report coming out of Germany last week talking about, actually, if Ukraine don't win, then we've got a war with Russia, and then you've got people strategizing a NATO war with Russia. If they don't have the strategic stockpiles of missiles to fire, Poland could, my opinion, it stays the same. Poland could defeat Russia, at least in a ground war at the moment, relatively easily. So when you talk about the whole might of NATO, Russia in a very vulnerable position. Anyway, Voronezh in Russia last night, explosions. So Voronezh was targeted. A series of explosions have hit Voronezh. Sounds like a drone attack. One of the blasts was caught on camera. Well, just about. So yeah, you can hear the drone, and it doesn't sound like it shot down. So you hear it sort of piston engine go, the moped engine, and then it sounds very much like there's no air defense shots against it. It sounds very much like it hit where it was intended to hit. I don't know. State emergency was introduced in Voronezh in western Russia. The MOD says 5 drones were shot down and 3 more were intercepted by means of electronic warfare. Of course, they say that. I don't know how true that was. And also, 4 drones were brought down over Belgorod overnight, says Russia. But again, were they brought down or were they brought down by their own momentum into their target? I don't know. In Melitopol, to return to that, there's a powerful explosion just outside the city last night. That's in occupied Zaporizhia. After that, they say residents heard one after another smaller blasts while Russia's helicopters circled over the occupied city. So there were some significant attacks on Melitopol last night as well. Ukrainian military intelligence notes a shift. I've reported this to you. Many people have said this, but just to reiterate it, to kind of send this home as an idea. The Ukrainian military intelligence notes a shift in Russian targeting, moving from Ukraine's energy sector last winter to its defense industrial facilities this winter, with a threat of the energy sector looming. So they might still strike energy facilities, but at the moment they're really going for the defense facilities inside Ukraine. Now, moving on to other bits and pieces, there's been an accident at the Magadan CHP, so that is a combined heat and power plant in Russia. I think that's what that stands for. The temperature in Magadan is minus 29 degrees centigrade. Whew. Residents report that in various neighborhoods of Magadan, there is weak pressure or no hot water at all. The batteries are cold. So again, we have this issue right across Russia in many different places concerning their own energy infrastructure and I guess the quality and standard of life of their own citizens must be terrible at the moment in many of these places, especially when you look at somewhere like that. I mean, this is unbelievable to me. So, as Tim White says, this is what Russia has become under Putin. Of course, this can be just anecdotal, but there seems to be a lot of footage like this coming out. All the money goes to the war. Meanwhile, this video shows the inside of a block of flats in Kolyma region. This is what corruption looks like, he says.
Not the января. Вот так вот у нас все происходит.
Just look at that. Look at that.
Это нормально?
It's incredible.
Абсолютно все.
And, that's someone complaining about that. In other words, if they're recording that and complaining about it, this isn't normal, right? That's not normal. They're putting this on social media to complain. Those stalactites are also dangerous. I mean, I saw one dropping from a building the other day on a video that almost took out like 3 people. So these can be really dangerous, falling, sharp shards of ice falling on people's heads. It's not a good thing. But yeah, it's not a good look, this block of flats, is it? Anyway, there you go. That's that area of Russia for you. Right. Finally, the Kremlin, according to the ISW, is intensifying efforts to limit criticism of the war ahead of the presidential election. So Russian State Duma deputies have proposed a bill confiscating personal property from those convicted of spreading fake news, scare quotes, fake news, or also known as truth, about Russia's war in Ukraine, a move aimed to increase censorship ahead of the 2024 Russian presidential election, the ISW has assessed yesterday. Now, this is part of my ongoing segment entitled, This is What Freedom Looks Like. So in today's segment, This is What Freedom Looks Like, you're not allowed to say anything about the war ahead of the elections and if you do, you will get your property taken off you, as well as being convicted for spreading fake news. This is what freedom looks like. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care. Speak soon.